Hey, it's Brian. I am back from the Sundance Film Festival, where you might have seen me record a couple of my videos in recent days. I was there for about a week, and then when I got back, I watched another few films at home for Sundance. So over the course of about 11 days, I watched 27 movies. Now, I'm not going to give you individual reviews of every movie I watched at Sundance. We would be here a while, so what I've decided to do is I'm going to make about 6 or 7 individual reviews of the movies I love the most, the films that I think are going to have an impact in 2024, potentially next award season, as we're going to talk about in this video. And then toward the end of February, I will give you a wrap-up Sundance video that will break down very briefly all the films I saw, and I have seen some amazing things. My trip to Sundance was my favorite film festival experience I've ever had. It was such an incredible week. The weather was very nice. I got to catch up with some amazing friends. I got to spend some time with Cody Derricks from Next Best Picture. We recorded a video recently giving our early Oscar winner predictions. Go check that out if you haven't watched that yet. I also got to spend time with Oscar expert and brother bro. Had a wonderful day with them and saw them here and there throughout the festival. We're gonna need to collaborate on something at some point, right? And got to see an old friend from college, and because I was there for a week instead of like 3 or 4 days, I got to kind of pace myself. I wasn't just going movie to movie to movie to movie without eating anything, without like taking a breath. I was seeing on average about 3 films a day, and it was just a really nice, relaxing, lovely experience. And now I'm back to give you some reviews of my absolute favorite films I saw at Sundance. And I had to start with the movie that got me definitely the most traction on Twitter when I said Saoirse Ronan gives an Oscar-worthy performance in the Outrun. Here we are, a little more than a week later, and I still stand by that. The Outrun is a great film, a very emotional piece of filmmaking, and this is one of Saoirse Ronan's finest performances ever. Let's talk about The Outrun. So as you know, I'm a huge Saoirse Ronan fan. Lady Bird was my favorite film of 2017, and a few months ago, I spent more than a week putting together her Elusive Oscar video. She is still not quite 30 years old, and she has received 4 Oscar nominations: for Atonement in 2008, for Brooklyn in 2016, for Lady Bird in 2018, and for Little Women in 2020. And it's been a little bit quieter for Saoirse Ronan the last few years. Like, she was never talked about as a serious awards contender for like The French Dispatch or Ammonite or See How They Run, and definitely not for Foe, a movie that made my list of the top 10 worst movies of 2023. I didn't really know what to expect from The Outrun. Like, I hadn't really heard much about it. When I saw it had a premiere at Sundance, I was obviously very excited, but it didn't go into the dramatic competition section. It was in the premiere section. Some of those movies can be hit and miss, and so there was no guarantee that this was going to be like a great film. I had my high hopes, and what was kind of weird about my Sundance experience is that the first 4 films I saw, I didn't much care for. Like, my festival experience started off not so great. Like, my first day, I wasn't really connecting with any of the stories, and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, what's happening here? Like, once I got to the 4th film, and that one was a little better than the first 3, but I was like, something's off. Like, do I need coffee or something? What is going on? And then that second night, I settled into The Outrun at the Library Center Theater. It was a packed house. I was kind of late, and I had to sit in the front row. Like, I walked in, I'm looking around for seats, and sometimes there's that panic of like, okay, if I keep looking for the perfect seats, Eventually, there will be nowhere to sit, so I was like, you know what? The screen was pretty small in terms of most of the venues at Sundance. I said, I'm not going to be craning my neck too much, I'll be okay. So I sat in the front row, like right in front of the screen, which did create some excitement after the film ended, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I was like, I want to say 10, 15 minutes into the Outrun, and I could just relax. I knew I was in good hands of a fantastic filmmaker and a tremendous actress at the top of her game. The Outrun tells a story we have seen before. If you've seen a lot of movies, you've read some memoirs, you kind of know what you're getting in the Outrun. But the filmmaking craft is at such a high level, and the performance by Ronan is extraordinary to the point where the Outrun for me, after a while, felt totally fresh. The way it's edited together, this is not a streamlined narrative from beginning to end. We see the main character Rona hit rock bottom, get a little better, get bad again, progress in positive and negative directions over the course of about 10 years of her life. And the film kind of bounces around to different places. There were, I would say, 2 or 3 points where I was like, wait, is this toward the beginning? Is this later? And basically, you have to pay attention to the color of her hair. Like, that tells you what part of the narrative we're in now. And as Saoirse Ronan and the director, they talked about in the Q&A, that was not done for the movie just so the audience could figure out, like, okay, what year are we in here? No, that was something that Amy Liptrop, who wrote and published her memoir, The Outrun, actually did. Amy was a part of the Q&A as well, and she talked about how she did even crazier things physically that Saoirse Ronan attempted, and like some of them didn't quite work out for the movie. But the hair was a big part of that story and kind of where she was in her journey to recovery. And so that's an element of the movie, and it does kind of help us navigate where she is. They did change her name for the film. It's not Amy, it's Rona, but it is heavily based on this memoir. And you see Rona at the high points and the very low points. Like very early in the movie, she is going kind of batshit crazy at a bar, and she is screaming at the top of her lungs, hitting back as they just try to get her out of there. She is blind drunk, and you know in the early scenes of the movie, like, okay, this is a character who needs help. Like, this is not something she's going to be able to do on her own. And so in the Outrun, which I don't want to give away like all the elements of the story. Very few people have seen this movie. I do think the Outrun is going to be an important film in 2024, as I'll talk about towards the end. Like, I don't know right now, like when it's coming out, like what studio might have it. But as long as they don't like completely bungle the release of this movie, I do think this is going to be an important film of the year, and many, many, many people are going to love it, get something out of it. And so I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to tell you what happens at the end, obviously. But what you need to know about the Outrun is, if you are a Saoirse Ronan fan, you are likely going to love this. She is the whole show here. I mean, you think about Little Women, Lady Bird, even Brooklyn. Brooklyn, she's very much the star of. There's typically kind of large ensembles to many of her films, the films that got her Oscar nominated. Of course, there are many supporting characters in the Outrun, but basically, I mean, I don't know if there is a single scene in this movie that she's not in. Like, she is the star of this thing. She is almost never off camera. And Saoirse Ronan in the Outrun has to navigate a character who could come off as very unlikable to the audience. There are 5, 6, maybe more scenes where the character is hitting rock bottom, and she is doing and saying the nastiest things to the people around her, the people that she loves. In the film, she has a relationship with a man that starts off very hot but as her alcoholism takes a turn for the worst, like, this guy will put up with a lot, but eventually, like, if she's not going to help herself, there's only so much he can do. And so Rona does go to rehab. Many of her early scenes in the movie is about her time as a young woman in London. But ultimately, Rona decides, like, to really get better and to try to find myself. Rona decides, I'm going to go back home to Scotland's Orkney Islands, where they actually did shoot a lot of this movie. And she spends time with her family. She has intimate conversations with her mother. She spends some time with her father, who she's never had, like, the greatest relationship with, but she's trying to make it better. And then there are also sections of the Outrun where she is just on her own, where she's living by herself and there's very few people around her. And it kind of feels like she's at this northern tip, loneliest place in the world, where she takes long walks, she goes for swims, and it's like dead silence. And she's just trying to do everything she can to get better and finally reclaim her life. The Outrun lives or dies by the lead performance here. If you don't have a compelling actor, a fantastic performance, I do think the Outrun, especially in the second hour, would start to feel repetitive or maybe get kind of dull. This is not a fast-moving narrative. There are lots of quiet scenes, scenes of reflection, moments of pain and grief and regret. It's a very sad film at times. I was crying more than once. I'm kind of an easy crier. I did learn this at this year's Sundance because I was freaking crying and everything. I was like, one movie after another, I'm just like weeping. Like, I'm like, what is happening here? But the first movie that did make me cry was The Outrun, because I just found it to be such a powerful story told beautifully by the director, Nora Fingscheit, who does just a lovely job here, kind of balancing different aspects of this narrative and just letting Saoirse Ronan rip. Just let her shine her light with this complex character. This is one of Saoirse Ronan's finest performances. I was kind of in awe of her by the end of this movie. She takes you on a journey with this character I found to be captivating and devastating. So much of this movie is played out in tight close-ups of Saoirse Ronan's face, and she is just dazzling in this. When her character's at the bottom, when her character's at the top. You root for her, you never look down on her, even when she's doing some horrible things at times, saying terrible things, like you want her to get better. Saoirse Ronan has this charisma as a performer that draws you in right from the beginning and never lets go. And by the finale, I won't tell you what happens at the end, but there is a catharsis in the last 5 minutes of The Outrun that had me crying and that had me gasping in awe. A mix of a very fine performance from Ronan and some truly unique filmmaking, cinematography, editing aspects. The way this movie ends is phenomenal and memorable and sweeping in a way I was not really prepared for. And then at the heart of it, in that scene and in the rest of the movie, you have this Saoirse Ronan performance that I am never going to forget. Honestly, after having watched like more than 25 films at Sundance, I do think if there was one performance I saw my entire week that could go on to get an Oscar nomination in early 2025, it is Saoirse Ronan for The Outrun. Partly because she's been nominated 4 times before, so they love her, obviously, but also because it's a really important story, well told. She's in virtually every frame for 2 hours, And it is just one of her finest performances. I think it's easily in the top 3 performances I've seen of hers. Like, I don't know if I would put it above Lady Bird. I adore her in Lady Bird. It's a very different kind of character, a much younger character. But what she does in the Outrun is extraordinary. And again, if you're a fan of her work, you're going to love this. And so yeah, the movie ends, I'm wiping away my tears, and the end credits finish, the lights come on, and the Q&A takes place where Saoirse Ronan is called out, and for the entirety of the Q&A, Saoirse Ronan is like right in front of me, like directly in front of me, like 3 feet away. And so that was a thrill too. I'm such a big fan of her work, and then to get to see her in person like that and to have her talk about this role and how much it meant to her. I snapped a few photos, I got a video of her talking, and I was just on a high walking out of that theater. Not just the Q&A, getting to see her in person, although that was very cool, but the movie itself, it just spoke to me. I thought, you know, this does tell a story we've all seen before in certain ways, but having Saoirse Ronan at the center of it, and with all of these really neat filmmaking and narrative elements, it did feel like a true original. I mean, is it slow at times? Yes. Does it always work all the time? No. I'm not going to give this film like a 10 out of 10. I'm not sure if it will show up like in my top 10 films of the year. Probably not. But I have to be honest, there was never a scene in the Outrun for 2 hours that bored me, that made me go, well, this part could move a little faster, let's move on. And I don't know how much of that was just the strength of the movie itself, or maybe it was, in a way, the Saoirse Ronan performance. She is so captivating of a performer, not in everything. Like, I learned watching Foe, 2023's Foe, that if the material just isn't there, there's only so much she can do. So it is possible for her to be in a very bland, boring movie that I don't care for. But when it came to the Outrun, I was with her and this story every step of the way. I adored this film. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about it. Again, I don't know when it's coming out. I'm not sure as of this recording if a studio has picked it up. I'm sure somebody somewhere is going to see the potential in this movie, the potential for award season. Like, I'm not too worried about it. The Outrun is going to come out at some point, and I'm really hopeful it will get a theatrical release in the fall of 2024 because Saoirse Ronan is that good, and she could very well be on her way to her 5th Oscar nomination. I give the Outrun an 8 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing. And let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite Saoirse Ronan performance? And are you excited by the prospect of her returning to the awards conversation in the months to come? We'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.